everyone, so we're doing the second part to the You're Not Really Agile.
Alright. Yeah. Alright. Yeah. Alright.
The first one that we wanted to look at today is you're not really agile if you are not testing and learning.
Alright. Yeah.
Now, what do we mean by that? It means a deliberate effort to test a hypothesis, see whether or not it makes sense, draw the conclusions, and based on that, you take some steps. We're not talking about just willy-nilly some gut feeling and we feel like, hey, we want to spend some money to run an experiment, but rather it's a deliberate effort and we're trying to figure out, one, if what we are thinking, if it's being validated. Two, if it's not validated, then what are the next options that we can start looking at? But this needs to be a deliberate, consistent effort. It's not one-off. It's not at the start of a project. It's not just in the middle of the project. It's not when we feel like, okay, we have a solution that we want to deliver. It has to be something that we're looking on continuous.
Yes, Nikki, I definitely agree. It's something that you have to be deliberate about. And as Nikki's saying, it's not something that you just do on the fly. It's something that you have to make a concerted effort to implement into your way of working. Why? Because it's easy when you're in the belly of the beast to get lost in the amount of work you have to get done. But if there are opportunities to try something different, if there are opportunities to deliver something a little bit different, if there is an opportunity to invest some time and effort to see if something you're considering is feasible before you actually go big bang and all out in trying to hammer it out and get it done and build it and deliver it, only to find out it's something that your customers at the end of the day not really interested in.
Now, one thing that just came to mind when you were actually talking, Chan, is the fact that because it has to be deliberate action, it also means that as a team, we all have to be on the same page. So and account for the time that we're going to spend doing this particular experiment. What that means practically is, for example, in your sprint planning or any planning exercise that you have, we'll have to deliberately set aside time for us to conduct that experiment. And that also has a ripple effect, because what it may mean is that, for example, if you're working on completing a feature, the feature may not be completed in that sprint because, again, you're accounting for the time that is needed for the experiment. And it also means that you may need to have some conversations with your stakeholders for them to understand what is going to be happening in the sprint in terms of the experiment and what you have planned specifically for the feature. Now, when you're thinking about your experiments, I think we alluded to the fact that it can't just be a gut feeling. It has to be on the premise of something. You want to figure out if this is the best solution for something. We want to figure out if that is really a problem worth solving. Now, a part of that conversation with your stakeholder may be as well outlining the experiment that you are trying to conduct. What is the hypothesis? What is the theory that you're trying to prove? Once you have had that conversation with your stakeholders, now as a team, you have to figure out how it is that you're going to actually go about that experiment. I mean, one of the things you can look at is even conducting a proof of concept. What if there's a similar solution that you can perhaps piggyback on? What does it already offer? Does it help you to figure out what you can use in the long run? Those are the kind of conversations that you want to have. But then again, it all goes back to testing and learning. And what it enables, you'll hear a lot of talk about learning early, failing fast. All of them mean the same thing, but it's all based on the premise that we have to be testing. We can't assume that we know everything. We have to have those experiments to help us validate or invalidate some of the things that we're thinking.
Completely agree, Nikki. And I think one of the important points you just made is the whole, we can't only be testing, we must also be learning. So you can't be running a bag of experiments and not think that you need to stop and kind of evaluate what were the outcomes and how do we use those outcomes to inform our next steps and our next decisions. So great points made, Nicola.
And I think you summed this up nicely, Shan, because it's important that from these experiments, once we have observed, recorded the data, and then we can make some informed decisions, then the cycle continues. I mean, interestingly enough, I was looking in my son's grade 8 science book, and they were talking about the scientific method, and that's pretty much it. Identify the problem, coming up with a hypothesis, what are the conclusions that we expect. Then you run the experiment, you observe, you record the data, and then make the informed decision, and then the cycle starts over again. So similarly, when we're working in whatever environment it is, to foster a culture of continuous testing and learning. Remember, don't do the testing and not take away the findings for the learnings. Both of them come hand in hand. That's the only way it can work.
Agreed. All right. So you're not really agile if team empowerment is non-existent in your organization.
All right. Yeah.
Ta-da. I think a lot of organizations struggle with this component of transitioning from command and control to an environment where you allow your teams to make decisions and do what they need to do to deliver whatever that end product is. And so if it is that your organization is struggling with letting go of that command and control mentality and mindset, then it means that you're not really agile, unfortunately.
I mean, one of the things that you can think about too is for traditional organizations, and I say traditional in quotes, who have not yet embarked on an agile transformation or just try to change the way they're working, even without putting the word agile in it. One of the things you can do is to start small. So instead of one day you're a traditional company, the next day you're like, no, we're fully agile, and you expect that everybody's going to be on the agile bandwagon. How about taking, for example, starting with one team, allowing that team the control to define what the problem is that they're trying to solve in terms of, what is good for your business, yes, but what are customers asking for? What are your end users looking for? And give that, it's almost like you're going to run another experiment to see if with that team, letting go of the command and the control and allowing them to actually immerse themselves in the work, talking to the customers, talking to you as a stakeholder to understand what is required and putting all those pieces together and start incrementally delivering a small piece, little by little, adapting as needed, pivoting as needed. It's important to try that as opposed to, again, I know we use this term a lot, but the big bang. One day we're just a traditional company and tomorrow we're just all agile and we're all doing stand-ups and so we're fully agile. That's not it.
Yeah. And I think key to what you said with the one team scenario, Nikki, is that you have to ensure that you have the right people on that one team, ensuring that the people you've chosen are equipped enough to make those decisions that need to be made quickly, because the whole premise of Agile is that you're able to move faster, you're able to move quickly. So if it is that you're still using your existing hierarchy to get certain approvals before the team can proceed with doing things, it's going to mean time wasted, time delayed, value delayed, and it's at a serious cost. So if it is that you're going to run a test and learn or an experiment with one team, empowering that team to make the decisions, you have to ensure that you have the right people on that team.
Yeah, completely agreed. I guess it comes back to the definition of the word empowerment. When I think about it, I think about the word motivated, because I feel like persons can have so many conversations about, well, what motivates you? Is it intrinsic motivation or something external? If it's external, it's wrong. It's the same with empowerment, but then it comes back to, as you said, Shan, the team just having enough power and being trusted to get the job done. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think anybody goes to work thinking that, oh, I'm going to do my worst today.
And I think too, if you team empowerment with the whole notion of transparency, it will give you some comfort. If it is that you're allowing your teams to fail fast, fail early, and you understand the concept of the role that failure plays in Agile, then you will also empower them to can be completely open and transparent with you to say, this isn't working. We're not going to meet this timeline. We're having some serious issues on the team with the people. It can be whatever it is. They will be 100% transparent with you because they feel comfortable. They feel safe enough to can articulate frankly what's going on with the work that they're doing.
Right. And I mean, once they are that comfortable to be transparent with you about those things as well, I mean, as a manager, C-level executive speaks a lot when you also get into the weeds with them. So there's an issue that may be preventing us from going as fast as we possibly could. Like, sit at the table. What are the options that we can look at? So at the end of the day, it's also about that collaborative culture. So you start with your team empowerment, giving them the tools that they need, trusting that they'll get the work done. If anything is slowing the work down, we come to the table and we figure out, hey, how do we get this moved?
That's so true, because sometimes, especially in a new transformation, the weeds are going to be the status quo. I'm trying to get to production, but there are so many steps I have to go through, and I'm hitting my toe at every juncture, trying to get myself and my team and the product out the door. If you have that C-level support to say, okay, what's going on, what's going wrong, and you can talk through and analyze the problem with them, you as a leader can now find an opportunity to say, okay, I see what we need to do. Let's do away with this, this, and this, and instead let's just do this. Go ahead. Your teams will rate you for that.
Well said. Best way to say it. Enough ratings. I mean, talking about this, I think takes us into the next thing that we wanted to look at. Like, you're not really agile if documentation is slowing down getting the actual solution, the products, whatever value it is that you're trying to deliver, out the door.
All right. Yeah.
Don't get us wrong, we're not saying no documentation. We're saying just enough, just like everything else in Agile. It's just enough at the right time. What is the simplest thing that we can do? It shouldn't be a case where you need to spend 2 months documenting something about the solution in order for you to get it through the door. Within 2 months, you should have been able to actually put out a release of the product, start getting some end users through, and start getting some of that feedback. And it also ties into what we were just mentioning, especially when you're just starting on your journey. Some of the weeds, some of the things that you're encountering would have been what the organization is used to. Agile does a good job, an awesome job, of starting to unearth some of those inefficiencies, because then what it allows you to do is to start figuring out, how do we move these inefficiencies out of the way? And so when we're thinking about documentation as well, we always say to people, if you're looking at your process, if you can start ripping away some of the documents, if you realize that you have 2 types of documents that are pretty much serving the same purpose, what are some of the things that you can do to streamline what that process looks like? Because at the end of the day, it shouldn't be a weighted task. And getting the documentation done should not be time consuming either. It should not feel like a full-time job just having the documentation done. Your focus should be on getting the value, whatever that value looks like, the solution, a new feature, a new product, whatever it is, out to your users so that you can start having them interact with it.
Yes, completely agree with everything you said, Nikki, because I know in Agile, because the Agile values speak to documentation, we're quick to release documentation in the Agile world. We don't need it anymore. But the black and white serves a purpose. And so you just have to figure out within your own context, which documentation is worth the time, which documentation do we actually need, and what does the documentation actually need to say. So think about it in your own context. And the good thing about Agile is it allows you to change as you go along. So if it is that you've tried one approach and you realize, oops, we needed something else, then you just implement it. So going forward, it becomes a part of your norm, and just adjust as you keep growing and developing and maturing in your organization. So the last one for this part 2 of you're not really agile if. So you're not really agile if you are being told or asked to pivot, but it's based on somebody's gut feeling or just somebody's whim or their fancy.
All right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how many of us can relate to this, but it is important that as a part of changing the status quo of your organization, you challenge the way we do things, we challenge the way we think about things, we challenge our approaches. And so if it is that you're asked to pivot, it is only fair that you understand the full context within which the decision is being made for you to forego completing something or forego working on something that you may have completed the planning steps for to get that part started. You have to understand the context within which you're now being asked to do something else. So I think one of the best ways to do that is always to use data. I think it's only fair that you ask questions. You ask for the data. You ask questions like, how many customers will be impacted? Okay, What's the expected value you're expecting from this new delivery? And you also have to ask for time for you to do your own investigation as a team to figure out, is it even feasible? What would it require for us to deliver something of this magnitude, or, to meet this goal? You have to kind of start thinking through the next steps in a way where you're giving yourself and the team space and time to figure it out, to see how can we do this.
And in my head, it all ties back to two things. We touched on the whole collaborative culture.
Yes.
Because if we're all really rowing together, we row a lot. And we're having those continuous conversations, not just on the team side, but with the stakeholders who also have a part to play in the entire process. Then even being asked to pivot, as you mentioned, we should have some insights about, okay, what are we thinking? Why is that we need to pivot? And it also brought me back to the conversation which we were just having a few minutes ago about experimenting. Because what if, based on some data, there's an opportunity for an experiment to be done? It may not be a big solution that we'll need to take another 4 or 5 months figuring out, but perhaps an experiment where within 2 weeks we can see if it's feasible to actually go broader with what it is. So those are the things that come to mind for me when I'm thinking about, not just acting on gut feeling. And Shani said it perfectly. It's about what's the data that's out there. Is it that we just went to bed and we woke up and we're like, I feel inspired, this is it? Can't be. We have to be moved by feedback, data. Something has to inspire what that move is, not just this is how I'm feeling today, because that is a definite recipe for disaster.
Yes, and we would also encourage you to feel empowered enough to say, maybe we can work on that next. And that will buy you some more time to really have the conversations you may need to have, to think through the implications of what is being asked, to think through how you would go about doing it at all, and taking the conversations from there. I don't think we should just jump and always say, yeah man, you want something else? You asked me for a mango and you want an apple? No, it's not so easy sometimes to switch, especially if it is that you have informed data or informed information that was leading you to do whatever it is that you're planning on working on next. You have to have that hard conversation to say, are you willing to forego, giving the customers a pencil and instead you want to give them a spray bottle? You have to kind of have that conversation to say, okay, but with the pencil, the customers will be able to write, they can draw, they can erase. And so they were really looking forward to the pencil, and if it is that they're pushing for the spray bottle, then they need to explain to you how this benefits the customers. Is it that they will be able to transport different liquids? I don't know. Let them tell you how the spray bottle would be, become the priority over the pencil, which the customers actually ask for.
And what you just said ties back to team empowerment. I think the 4 things that we just discussed today feels like they're all intertwined somehow. We all need those various parts. We need to make sure that we're trusting our teams to get the job done. Yeah. We need a continuous collaboration. We need to ensure that we are testing and learning. And everything that we're doing is actually based on data, based on something our end users have said to us.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. And we can't wrap this point without also saying, but there will be instances where you may be forced, or you may just have to just accept that you've been asked to pivot and you'll just have to pivot. But I feel it is important to say that you should just probably take notes as you're going along about how the process is. Is it more difficult for you to get it done? Is there a lot of hang time on the team because you're having to shelve something you were already prepared to start or prepared to deliver, so that you can figure out how you can, deliver this new ask? You have to really kind of have informed conversations after the fact if you're being told you have to deliver something. So take notes so that you can keep the conversations going, because you may lose a battle. I'm using these terms lightly, but you may lose a battle to eventually win the war if it is that you come equipped with the facts to say, when we are prepared, we deliver our things on time. When you ask us to pivot at the very last minute for something that may not have been extremely crucial, but you don't have to say it that way, you have to say it nice. You say it took us an additional 4 weeks before we could actually start the work because of the amount of conversations we had to have, because we had to figure out how it's going to work, etc., etc. So you have your own set of data after the fact to say, let's try to be a little bit more strategic and purposeful about when you're asking us to pivot, at least, going forward.
Wraps it up nicely. I mean, this has been our second edition of our new series. You're not really agile if, and you have to get the roll eyes if.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining. As usual, we want to hear from you. So tell us as well, what are some of the things that come to mind? You're not really agile if. How would you end that statement? And hit us up in the comments.
Talk soon.
Yeah, I got a question.